Boris Johnson, maybe he's just been hiding it from all of us. And in fact, this bumbling through is, maybe it's just great leadership. Anyway, let's find out what Jason Reed, head of Young Voices UK, thinks. He's in the studio with me. Jason, good morning.
Good morning, James.
So, Boris Johnson, in some shape or form, is he providing any depth of leadership, or is it time that he stepped down?
I think it's very much time that he stepped down. There's one area that he is a shrewd operator, and that is ensuring that the next day's newspaper headlines are favourable towards him, at least when he wants to. We've got countless headlines, you know, I'm sure we're going to talk about the front pages, but the Eye, the Telegraph, the Mail, the Express, even the Mirror, hailing him as being the one who's flown in with his cape to save us from Christmas lockdown.
Is it because they think that he isn't finished yet? And therefore to denigrate the Prime Minister in such a way when there isn't really any new news to have a go at. I mean, we've had a sort of wonderful time Boris bashing. It's been absolutely extraordinary what he's managed to do himself. I mean, it's not as if there's been anybody else who's been flying the punches at him. It's just every time there is something, it's like, there's a goal. Oh, I'll just kick the ball in myself.
Exactly, it's completely self-inflicted. I think the fact that it's on the front page is more just that it's a good story, isn't it? It's a good narrative that we all want to hear about the hero. But at the same time, it's a little bit ridiculous that he poses the threat himself, or his government poses the threat of Christmas restrictions, and then he's the one who saves us from it, and we're supposed to be grateful.
But Sarah accuses me of Boris bashing and says, oh, another morning of it. Right. I mean, I'm kind of annoyed because when he was elected as leader, and then when he became Prime Minister, I thought that could be an impressive leadership ahead, combined with the fact that he seemed to have a vision of what post-Brexit Britain looked like, and he seemed to have the will of the nation, and he also was talking to parts of the nation that the Conservatives, frankly, have not talked to for a long time, if ever, and that I thought was impressive. But I think he's kind of lost the room.
He very much has. I'm in exactly the same position. I was very hopeful when he came in. I even voted for him in the 2019 Tory leadership contest, and then again in the election.
I'm not a member of the Tory party.
2019. There you go. You could escape responsibility for that one at least. But
I don't want to be a member of any political party, because if you're going to do this kind of program, I'm afraid that you've got to you've got to steer away from that sort of thing. And much as people might think that they know what I think, and I will say exactly what I think and who I voted for. I don't always vote for one particular party on the basis that I think that sometimes you have to be able to vote elsewhere, because you have to be able to show that democracy will remove people out of power just as much as you give them power.
Well, do you know, if there was an election tomorrow, I might reconsider my position.
But where would you put your vote?
This is a good question. I don't know. I think even Keir Starmer would be better than Boris Johnson. I didn't agree with what you said before about Keir Starmer. I think he's an adult in the room a little bit.
No, I don't think so. I think his lack of leadership is astonishing.
You get the impression that at least he's mature enough to know what he's doing and tie his own shoelaces, as opposed to Boris Johnson.
Sadly, I don't think he does.
He's just planning where the next wine and cheese gets
No, I think he knew how to tie his shoelaces yesterday. I think he's brilliant at looking at what has been done. I think he's forensic with how he pores over papers and looks at things. On occasion, he has a good performance, but he's very lawyery, and I come from a family of lawyers, so I speak with experience. I'm afraid a lawyer brain doesn't allow you to think strategically. It allows you to clear up mess and sort your way through things, but it doesn't necessarily give you the full skill set that as a leader you need to have. And I want to have confidence that someone's going to take good decisions when you don't have all the details, and when you can't make decisions based on information that you already have. You have to take judgments about what's going to happen in the future.
I get the feeling with Starmer that if he was surrounded by a good, competent team of advisors and a good cabinet...
He's not. I mean, he's surrounded by people who are prepared to call anybody who votes anything other than Labour scum. He's prepared to have people who still don't understand what anti-Semitism is. He's prepared to have people who are infighting beyond belief as to what the core and the soul of the Labour Party is. And also, I think he's a turncoat. I think at any opportunity, they'll switch up the rhetoric, and they'll start taxing anything that doesn't move.
But you could say the same about the Tory party.
I'm not supporting their tax and spend policies. Yeah. I think it's appalling.
The Keir Starmer's biggest flaw, in my opinion, is the fact that he's so boring, the enormous
he
electoral
brings a new
deficit.
meaning to the word boring that I hadn't even previously been aware
It's
of.
just so dreary, isn't he?
Dreary. That's a great word to describe him. Dreary. Now, we will take a look at the day's top stories, and also, Jason, you and I will go through some of those front pages and the headlines as well. In the studio with me is Jason Reed, head of Young Voices UK. Look, let's just pick our way through what I suppose is the news agenda at the moment. So we will be talking about this £1 billion taxpayer bill to cover the festive washout. I mean, Rishi Sunak, again, has sort of come out looking like the knight in shining armour with some kind of policy. And I don't know, the general conclusion was, OK, good move, but it's kind of the start and not the finish. It's not enough, is it?
It's not. Rishi Sunak seems to be the name at the top of the list when it comes to talking about future contenders for the leadership of the Conservative Party, but it's easy to forget that he's only been in Cabinet for 5 minutes, and the reason he's so popular is because he's spent his entire time in Cabinet dishing out money, left, right and centre, because he's been the COVID Chancellor. And this latest announcement just goes to show the additional costs of restrictions that we don't even get to talk about, because there's so much fervour and so much Cabinet panic around the need to implement restrictions. And I mean, £1 billion doesn't come close to what various industries need. The hospitality industry in particular is, as you would expect, very, very animated about this. On the front page of the FT, it says they're calling it only a sticking plaster on Omicron wounds. Rishi Sunak's line, of course, is that he's being very generous because he's giving almost as much support as was given when businesses were shut down completely. But I don't think that's a fair comparison.
Now, we've got a range of graphs and bits of information that have perhaps given the Prime Minister pause for thought. So after Omicron cases, so they've now dipped in London after reaching those record highs. Now, you could say that they've dipped because we've got a situation in which nobody's been coming to work and a lot of Christmas parties all being cancelled. So kind of the work was done for him. He didn't have to take a decision. People took decisions, firms took decisions like this one. We didn't have a Christmas party here. Last night I was supposed to be able to do, it didn't happen. All sorts of things that I was supposed to be going to do. So I guess if you stop socialising and mixing and various other things, inevitably the cases are going to fall.
Yeah, we've got to learn to stop panicking. I think we've got to learn to live with the virus. Viruses mutate. There will be more mutations. It's not going to end with Omicron. If we do this every time, where on the private side people cancel parties and events and everything, and on the government side we have this same Groundhog Day discussion about do we need another lockdown, then we'll just never come out of the other side of the pandemic. Vaccines have been available for a very long time now. They are the silver bullet to get us out of the pandemic, and yeah, we're still waiting for the booster jab rollout, but no one was talking about boosters a year ago because there's no forward planning that goes on in government.
Well, they didn't know, to be fair. They didn't know. Israel's now talking about vaccine number 4. But anyway,
yeah.
Okay, where are you on the jabs and the jab process and system? Are you happy with the government rollout?
Broadly, yes. I wish they'd been a bit better with their communication, and they've told us, for example, much earlier that ventilation was key, so that we didn't have to do that ridiculous theatre of using wet wipes on chairs all the time, as if that was going to save us all from COVID.
We have added a lot of rubbish. I mean, it's kind of ironic that at the same time that everybody's worried about plastic and banning plastic straws, suddenly we've got test kits and everything else which use every manner of plastic. And we're just throwing this stuff away.
Yeah, I think the statistic is the number of plastic masks in the sea now outnumbers the number of jellyfish in the sea, because we throw away so many of them because we get through so many.
We do get through a lot of them.
Yeah.
Are you, dare I ask, you don't have to answer, are you vaccinated?
I am vaccinated. I've got my booster appointment booked as well.
Excellent, good work. Now, what do you make of this then? The Archbishop of Canterbury has declared the unvaccinated are immoral. He says that getting the jab is not about me and my rights to choose. It's about how I love my neighbour. Has he got a point?
You can see where he's coming from, but I wouldn't have put it like that, especially if I was the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Okay, so is he wrong then?
It's a bit far to say it's immoral. I don't really understand people's reasons for not having the vaccine, but people have different perspectives, different life experiences. I'm a big believer in personal choice, individual freedom. Everyone should have the right to do what they want to do. If someone doesn't want to get the vaccine and also wants the right to walk around and breathe in my face without a mask, then maybe we'd start to have a problem there. But
so is it wrong for him to step into this? So he's using his pulpit, his move into Christmas, his discussions. I suppose, look, Christmas is his big event. It's his big,
Big time
big
of year.
shindig of the year. But the unvaccinated are immoral, he says.
It seems unnecessary to be alienating people. I mean, I would have thought that the Christian message is one of bringing everyone into the fold. Jesus dined with sinners and all the rest of it. Why would you want to be sidelining people and saying, no, you're different and you're bad, I mean, to push you to the fringes of society? You could apply that to any number of choices. It's not just a vaccination thing. It seems to be a little bit short-sighted.
Meanwhile, what do you make of the different rules which have been imposed across the United Kingdom? Who's got it right? So Scotland, they've cancelled Hogmanay and all of that stuff and partying, and they've already got restrictions in terms of the number of people who can congregate. Wales has this extraordinary situation where the Welsh government has now made going to work a crime, including a £60 fine for anyone unnecessarily travelling to the office. The new rules, which come into force on Monday, were branded outrageous and naive and will raise questions about how Welsh police would actually enforce the emergency legislation. Meanwhile, Northern Ireland's slightly behind, and I suppose that's because Omicron hasn't quite developed over there. So perhaps less of a headline in terms of the rules. And then here in the UK, don't go to work unless you have to, combined with a whole range of other, measures that may or may not come in, combined with a sort of dark cloud of things that are going to be announced after Christmas because Boris Johnson doesn't want to be accused of ruining it.
I think it's less a question of who's got it right and more a question of who's got it least wrong. At the moment, it is England who's got it least wrong because we have the least restrictions as far as I can see. But as you say, we have this avalanche coming after Christmas.
Right, okay. I just want to pick you up then because you said, well, at this stage, you'd rather have Keir Starmer in than Boris Johnson.
From a competence standpoint, not necessarily from a policy
but
choice
the thing is
standpoint.
that if Keir Starmer was there, we would have more restrictions by now. Look at what the London Mayor has done. Sadiq Khan, I mean, the guy couldn't run a bath. And yet he's trying to obfuscate and remove his responsibility from running London. He's decimated businesses. He's put in cycle lanes and stupid speed limits whilst we weren't looking. He's cancelled events, probably having spent money on them in the first place. And he's played political games with a health crisis, combined with a level of incompetence and driving around in his cavalcade whilst telling us to go and do various other things. I mean, the guy's, any kind of leadership that you're saying could be provided by opposition, that's what we'll get. And you see what the Welsh have done. You see what Mark Drayford has been doing. People go, first of all, he's dull. Very, very dull. Secondly, the rules and impositions that the Welsh have had to face is absolutely astonishing. I'm surprised that they haven't, rebelled and decided that they're just not going to tolerate this kind of nonsense. A £60 fine if they dare to go to work, but you can still go to the pub. What kind of idiot has put that rule in?
I agree with you on Sadiq Khan. I agree with you on Mark Drakeford as well. This rule is.
But then what about the people who work in the pub?
Exactly, yes. Yeah, go to the pub, don't go to work. If you work in a pub,
go
that's
to the pub,
area.
don't go to the pub. Don't go to the pub, do go to the pub. Oh, it's a free-for-all. Free drinks for everyone. There's no one working here. I mean, it makes no sense.
I get the sense that Keir Starmer is a little bit smarter than the pair of them. I'd like to see, if nothing else, Tories in opposition for a while, so they have a bit of time for self-reflection. We've had a Conservative government for about a century now.
Well, they need to have a clear out.
They do.
Exactly. And they need to get rid of all the people who are simply not competent and capable of being members of Parliament. They need to have a shake-up, and they also need to remove all of their... They need to remove the arrogance that assumes that they should be in power.
Yeah, exactly.
I think as soon as you have an assumption, it's the same as when Tony Blair had been in for too long. There was an assumption that they should be in power, and then they started putting all their friends and their mates into every kind of appointed role, and it just becomes too overwhelming and too much of a mates race.
I completely agree, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I think we're stuck with a Tory government for the next 7 to 8 years, at least because of the huge electoral deficit that was created in 2019. And if Keir Starmer was going to have a chance of rolling that back, he would have to be the most awe-inspiring, rip-roaring, barnstorming, once-in-a-generation leader to fire up the bases. But as we've said, he's incredibly dreary. It's just not going to happen the next time round, is it?
Indeed, somebody who can't spell my name properly, it's only one X, has said, James Max, 2 X's, idiot, asking people personal medical information, bed-wetting disgrace of a man. I mean, what kind, who sends that in as a tweet?
Bed-wetting disgrace of a man. That's a new one on me.
It just defies comprehension that somebody would want to send that.
I think you love it, really.
I don't care. I mean, if that's what you want to send, I think you can do better. If you want to give me a call, I'd much rather hear from you rather than just seeing sort of like vague vague insults. I mean, either do it properly, go big or go home. I mean, it's pathetic. Terence says, James, I have a sneaking suspicion that if Bojo can continue to tough it out, he might just come through it all. And he believes it too. Look at the last 12 months he's had in official and private life. It's very true. Okay. If you want to get involved in that conversation, if you want to have your say, because quite a lot of you don't necessarily agree with that view. Dear James and team, Boris is incompetent and is toast, says Lucasade. Well, there you go. Jason, okay. Let's put the bets on. Is Boris Johnson still Prime Minister in January?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with Terence. He's going to be there for ages yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You reckon he's going to hang on?
He's going to hang on. He's not going anywhere.
And is it because he's just got no competition from anybody?
It's partly that. It's partly because for whatever reason people like him. You can see why people like him. People vote for him in huge numbers. And if Theresa May was having parties during lockdown, then she wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes. But with Boris, it's kind of what you expect. We kind of knew it's what we were getting. He ruffles his hair before he goes out to the camera. He's always got his shirt untucked, that kind of thing. It's part of the package.
Do I need to start doing that?
I think it would suit you.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
I'll comb my hair and start ruffling. Blah, 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 and then I wouldn't have to think about what to say. I mean, we do blah, 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 blah.
Exactly. You just make the noises and just sort of, forgive me.
Oh, forgive me.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. Lost my place. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, in some respects, you know, it's great, but I just want leadership. And as I was talking to Justin Urquhart-Stewart there, so we got the geopolitical things where you want to have somebody who's going to have a very strong position and put the UK on the international map. You've got the health situation where unless somebody comes up with a radical solution for the NHS without throwing away the thing that the British people really like about it, although as a result of this virus and pandemic, you can't say anything about the NHS without people thinking that you're some kind of, I don't know, zealot, simply because we've idolised it so much that nobody wants to realise that it is a busted flush. In places it's incredible, in places it's competent, and in places it does the job, and in huge areas it misses, and it misses not because of the people who are frontline, who are generally speaking incredibly hardworking and dedicated. It's because the systems around them are supremely unfit for purpose.
The NHS is broken. It has been for a long time, but as you say, it's a sacred cow. Ironically, when people point out the fact that it's broken, it then gets bigger because the only solution politicians can come up with is let's throw more money at it. So
as
it
opposed to,
and grows.
And what I object to is people say the NHS needs more money, and then they do something like they did the other day, the publicity stunt, where they stuck wraparound adverts on every single newspaper. And I just think that is not a wise spending of money. If you, the Prime Minister, had decided that it was that important, you could have saved the 5 or 10 million quid or however much that cost, and you could have come on to every single radio station and said, well, actually, I will go on to the music stations. I mean, you know, where's the conversation with the likes of my colleague Chris Evans last week or whatever, or Stephen Mulhern this week? I mean, where are the conversations, or Alan Brazil down the corridor, or whoever it may be? You know, forget your allegiance to the particular stations. Bring the Prime Minister on, go and visit all those radio stations and do the chat and let people know what you think. That's far more effective than all of those adverts, and start to spend money more effectively, and they're just not doing it.
They're not. It's the same theme with Boris. He doesn't look beyond the immediate. It's always the quickest solution, the most easily available, the most popular immediate solution, which in the case of the NHS is always just more money. They never have that strategic conversation about how can we actually help people and how can we actually make sure we have a functioning health service in 20, 25 years' time, because he won't be in politics then. He doesn't care. It's the same with the environmental stuff at COP26. It's just immediate, you know, being seen to take action in the moment and kicking the can down the road.
Okay, let's look at the front pages. The Daily Telegraph. Glad tidings for Christmas, but perhaps not New Year. Are we being set up for the fact that Christmas goes ahead, and as soon as Christmas is done, out come the politicians, down come the shutters, in come the restrictions?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. We are being primed, and it's inevitable that now we're going to have some kind of avalanche of new restrictions that come in. I wouldn't be surprised if we have something resembling lockdown for most of January, and of course then it will take 5 months to get out of lockdown, because it always does, in incremental steps.
Okay, what lockdown measures do you expect to see?
I think it'll start off with things like outdoor hospitality only, so you won't be able to go into the pub or into the restaurant. I think they're reluctant to close schools. That'll be one of the later measures, but I think if that we continue having these kinds of scary stats coming out of Sage and Chris Whitty calling for more restrictions towards the end of January, we might see that as well, in which case we will effectively be in full lockdown.
Okay, do you support these measures?
No.
Okay, why not?
Because viruses mutate, there will be more mutations. There has to come a point where we say, okay, there's a degree of personal responsibility here. We're going to allow people to, as you were saying before, to decide whether or not to cancel their parties, to decide whether it's safe to travel or not to see their families. And we've got, I mean, one of the front pages today mentions about cutting the isolation period from 10 days to 7 days. That's exactly the kind of thing that people should be able to decide for themselves. If you've tested negative after 6 days, you should be perfectly free to go out. If you've still got COVID after 2 weeks, then you don't. We're sensible enough to do that ourselves.
Okay, we'll come back to the front page. Jason Reed, head of Young Voices in the UK, has stayed in the studio with me. So, Jason, look, we've had this conversation. We've been talking about various things which have been taking place, and now we're beginning to get a bit of a shape of it. There must be an element of you that says that Boris Johnson, he's now got these slightly positive headlines for the first time in a number of weeks, kind of played a bit of a blinder. When you have a look at the draconian measures brought in Scotland and Wales, maybe he's done the right thing.
If the world ends on Boxing Day, then maybe he's played a blinder, but he's still going to have to deal with the consequences after that, isn't he? I'm sure he's absolutely chuffed with the video he filmed yesterday and with the headlines he's got himself this morning. It's interesting you describe him as being stealthy. I think he might be the least stealthy person who's ever walked the earth. There's nothing stealthy about what he's doing.
I was just provoking. I was just poking the bear. All right, we'll come back to you in a sec, Jason. Jason, back to you. Maybe a little lighter stuff just before we let you go and disappear into the ether. As you might imagine, there's quite a lot of what can only be described as Christmas news in the papers. What for you makes the perfect Christmas day?
That's a good question. The perfect Christmas day for me is comes from the fact that my family is Italian. We have a very different Christmas dinner. Than the British one. We don't really dry turkey and horrible bread sauce and all of that rubbish.
With all due respect, I mean I don't come from this country anyway, but I've got used to turkey. Turkey doesn't have to be a dry bird. It's just bad cooking that makes it a dry bird. It can be very, very moist and delicious.
I'm sure it can. But
so what do you have?
The Italian meal anyway.
What do you have?
Well, about 10, 12 courses. Every Italian dish you can possibly think of served in just an entire day. Is the whole meal.
Right, so it's the whole day.
You just don't stop eating.
Okay, what is going to be the food highlight for you then?
Oh, that's a good question. All sorts of Sicilian delicacies, all kinds of...
Well, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you.
You don't know?
No.
Okay, an education in Sicilian cuisine.
Yes, please.
My grandmother, a speciality called umbriolati, which is a sort of bread-based dish with spiced sausage meat and potatoes and olives and all sorts of nice things. Okay. And they're served in a lump. It's fantastic.
And that comes out at Christmas time.
It does indeed.
Okay, I mean, is there a main event? I mean, is there a main course which might be, I don't know, beef, lamb, chicken, something as we would recognise it, or is it just a whole load of stuff?
It's a whole load of stuff served as much as will fit on the table at any one time,
right,
in a procession. And that's the way it should be. Everything should centre around
the only thing I've never got my head around, panettone. It's just a waste of time, waste of calories.
Oh, it's fantastic. What's not to love about
everything?
It's moist. It's sweet.
It's a no. Anyway, Fizz Games, 2 films and 4 inches of snow make the perfect Christmas day. Apparently, the poll has found that the perfect Christmas day starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. People eat lunch at 2:30. We'd like to have Fizz board games, presents, mince pies, and flopping in front of some film or telly later in the afternoon. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me.
That does sound very good.
And turkey and Christmas pudding. Now, Jason, if people want to find out more about you, where do they go?
You can find me on Twitter, JasonReed624, where I spend my whole life. And I run an organisation called Young Voices, which has lots of brilliant political commentators, much more eloquent than me, and you should check them all out because they're all excellent.
They're all excellent. There we go. I'm sure we'll put you at the top of the tree. There we are. Jason Reed, head of Young Voices UK. Thank you very much indeed for joining.